From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
At the Legislature today, the House Education Committee receives a hard lesson on the future of West Virginia's workforce. And citizens exercise their right to vote, but singing star Landau Eugene Murphy is campaigning to convince us all to exercise something else. These stories, plus a conversation with Republican leaders, tonight on the Legislature Today. Good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. West Virginia's community and technical college system is trying to fill what its chancellor calls middle-skilled jobs. As Adam Cavalier reports, the remarks came today in the House Education Committee.
CTCS Chancellor Jim Skidmore defines a middle-skilled job as a dental hygienist, for example. It's a position that requires a high school diploma, but not a four-year college education. Skidmore says there's an issue in filling that void because 60% of CTCS students need some level of developmental education.
It's a bigger challenge to get those students through to that degree because you have to remediate them and then get them on a track because we don't want to put them into a college level course in math or English in which they will not be successful because we know they're not going to graduate if that's the case.
The number of associate degrees the organization granted is up 34%, while one-year certificates have ballooned by 190%. Skidmore says the mission of the CTCS is just like that of any other educational institution.
We want to produce more graduates. That's priority number one, obviously. We have said that. And promote strong employer partnerships, economic development, workforce, serve more adults, and we need to build and maintain our facilities.
Skidmore says a definite area that needs improvement is assisting students with transfers to four-year degree-granting institutions.
If we ever had any additional money, and I've mentioned LOCIA a couple of times, I would love to see a +2 promise scholarship type for transfer students. It would increase the number of students going on to baccalaureate institution to get a baccalaureate degree, and it would really benefit those students if they have gone to community college. I don't know what grade point average, we put a 3.5 or 3.2 or whatever on it. It would really help them out in taking that next step, and we want to increase the educational level in our state.
Skidmore says the typical community college student is not a promised scholar. Just a fraction over 1% of community college students receive the scholarship. But Skidmore says that doesn't make finding those students some level of funding any less important.
We would like to increase the financial aid participation rate of all of our students. It's 43%. That's about what it is nationally, but we want to do better than that. We want to get more of our students eligible for financial aid because we know from surveys that one of the major factors that cause students to drop out of college is financial. So if we can get them financial aid, that might help them to persist and graduate.
Skidmore highlighted increased enrollment in the 10-school system, but cautioned lawmakers that West Virginia isn't graduating enough high school students to fill the workforce's needs. Skidmore says that makes career advancement an important CTCS initiative.
Our challenge is to work with those adults that most of which are already working. It may be at McDonald's, it may be at Subway, it may be at a convenience store, or they may already be in a high-wage, high-demand job. But there are a lot of those individuals that are working in minimum wage or close that need to get into training programs for middle-skilled jobs so they can move into higher-wage jobs.
CTCS enrollment is up 27%. However, that figure has leveled off after a few years of exponential growth, which Skidmore attributed to the recession. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Adam Cavalier in Charleston.
A day after a similar bill was introduced in the Senate, Wood County Delegate Daniel Poling brought a bill to the House that would allow the Parkersburg South mascot, a patriot, to bring a musket to high school games around the state. Poling says the bill is meant to create an exemption that would allow the mascot to carry a firearm on campus.
In this circumstance, when you go to the high school game when Parkersburg South plays, say, for instance, Capitol, the Patriot can carry the musket into the stadium unloaded, nothing but powder. And if they would indeed score a touchdown, they can fire the musket.
The bill has been referred to the House Judiciary Committee. The West Virginia University Mountaineer gets a similar exemption. Two bills were introduced in the state Senate today designed to change the way estates are divided if one of a separated or divorcing couple dies. Senator Doug Facemeyer of Braxton County introduced the bills. He says currently the law requires the assets of an estate to go to a surviving spouse, even if the marriage is in the process of being dissolved. He says many other states have similar provisions to protect the estate of the victim of an untimely death.
If a man and a wife file for divorce and they go through the political or the judicial process of this, and something would happen to one of them before the divorce became final, that the other spouse would not receive the assets. The way that the law is today, if a man and a wife file for divorce and before the divorce is completed, one of them passes away, their will and trust and assets stay intact. And most of the attorneys that asked me to introduce this said, that they didn't think that was the intent of the person who died. They've had a separation and they didn't want their assets to go to them. So that was the gist of it.
Any chance of passage?
Another measure introduced by the senator today would automatically revoke a will following a legal separation. The bills have been referred to the Judiciary Committee for further study. In a moment, we'll look at the agenda of the Republicans at this session. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 346 to create the Larry Border Act, named after a late member of the House of Delegates. The bill requires a prescription to dispense drug products that contains the ingredients for making methamphetamine. Senate Bill 347 to incrementally redistribute an existing excise tax on the transfer of real property so that over the course of 5 years, all monies collected will be paid to the county where the property is located instead of the state, and to require that monies be exclusively dedicated to the operation of regional jails, the cost of which have become a burden on many counties. Senate Bill 351 to limit the size of voting precincts to 3,000 registered voters in urban areas and 1,500 in rural areas. And Senate Bill 352 to criminalize the failure of a custodian or parent to report a missing child to law enforcement within 24 hours of the child's disappearance. This is a version of Kaylee's Law, named after the daughter of a Florida mother who was acquitted of murder last year. Up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 96 to make it clear that a prospective juror can be disqualified from serving if the person has been convicted of any crime punishable by imprisonment in excess of 1 year or any crime involving dishonesty or false statement. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 118 to provide for the termination of a residential rental lease upon the death of the leasee. Of the 100 seats in the House of Delegates, 35 are held by Republicans. Of the Senate's 34 seats, 6 are held by Republicans. Joining us tonight are the leaders of the GOP in the House and Senate. Senator Mike Hall of Putnam County, first elected to the House in 1994. He was first elected to the Senate in 2006. Delegate Tim Armstead was first appointed, then elected to the House in 1998, representing Kanawha County. Gentlemen, welcome. Glad you're here. So you both served together in the House at one point?
Yes.
All right. Very good. All right. In his State of the State address, Governor Tomlin said many times, about 3 times, that this is not Washington, D.C., where partisan bickering abounds. Is he right?
Well, I think he's right in the sense that we stand ready as a Republican caucus to work with the governor and with the leadership of the legislature when we can agree with each other on what should be the policy moving forward. At the same time, there are certainly issues where we feel we may disagree, and we're going to be very forceful, I think, in trying to move forward what we think is right for the state. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's a great deal of partisanship just for the sake of partisanship, but there is some, quite often disagreement on, how fast we should move forward in certain economic issues and disagreement on policy.
Mr. Hall, what's that relationship like in the Senate?
Well, you raised a very good point. I remember they've talked about Reagan and O'Neill would get to, fuss during the day and get together at night. Similar thing happens in the state Senate. We have a little room in the back where we kind of eat a meal together during the day usually. And so there's a lot of relationships built up. And of course, one thing that I've noticed is that the Democratic Party, even the governor's speech, no taxes, those types of things. There's a lot of agreement with the GOP's historic platform with the current posture of our governor, so that I'm not really unhappy that, that people would move towards those ideas, because those are our ideas. And so that does create a lot of comedy. There are often disagreements about this. Obamacare was one. I mean, we had a bill last year, 408, where I don't think there was one Republican that voted for it and one Democrat that voted against it. So obviously there was a divide there, and there are some things we can look at where we try to represent the Republican agenda. But
many people did describe the governor's speech as a Republican speech.
Yes, they did.
The governor said 2011 was a year of significant progress in business development and job growth. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is we still have over 55,000 West Virginians out of work, and that I think is very sobering to us as legislators. It should really, I think, be the thing that we concentrate on the most during this session is how can we create an atmosphere where those West Virginians they're our neighbors, our family members, people that some of whom have had to go out of the state now to find work. How can we work together to create jobs or create an atmosphere where the private sector creates jobs in West Virginia? And I think that's one of the real keys that we want to center on. We're glad that there has been some progress, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. We need to take some very bold steps in our tax structure, in our court system, in our education system, to really put our economy back on track and get these people back to work.
What specifically is on your agenda to make that happen?
Well, one of the things, for example, in our tax structure, we've already started working on some of the taxes that we have that are so out of sync with our surrounding states and other states that we compete with. One of those is this tax on inventory and equipment. This tax is so bad that the state of West Virginia, when it tries to attract companies into West Virginia, it often will try to go around this tax by buying the equipment itself and leasing it back to these companies. If we've got a tax that's so bad that we have to look at ways to get around it, then it's time for that tax to go away.
And this is the tax that counties use to fund schools.
Right.
This is the inventory tax.
Exactly. So one of the things that we've tried, we know that there's been a great deal of opposition because of the counties and the school systems. So what we'd like to do, and one of the things that we've proposed, is to take a portion of the money that is going to above and beyond what we're already collecting in terms of the severance tax on natural gas, because of the Marcellus and Utica shale. That's going to basically double within the next 3 or 4 years and then continue to grow, we believe. So we can capture some of that money without new taxes, take it and help offset to the counties and the school systems so that we can cut other taxes for our citizens and companies, not just for companies, but for our citizens, that will put more money back into the economy.
Okay, and I'm going to get to Mr. Hall in just a minute, but when you have an idea like that, do you take it to the Speaker of the House and say, here's our idea, why don't you do it?
We are in discussions with this. Right now we're working with various groups to try to put that exact package together and how it would work, what percentage we would be talking about, how it would be distributed. So those are the things that we're discussing right now. And we certainly invite the leadership, and I'm sure I'll be talking with the Speaker about this and with the Finance Chair and the Judiciary Chair about this proposal and all the others that are on our agenda. We certainly invite them to work with us on this, just as we are willing to work with them on initiatives that we agree with. So we're hoping that we'll have some real progress on this issue this session.
Mr. Hall, you had some interesting comments about the idea of road bonds and funding road construction in West Virginia.
Actually, the idea of the road bond was put forward by the Commissioner of Highways, Paul Maddox. Obviously, I live in Putnam County. We had dominated our agenda last year was Route 35 and so forth. It is possible for the state of West Virginia, and I believe that West Virginians should be given the opportunity to decide on this, for us to do some aggressive road building. Let's talk about a couple things about our roads. we have more deaths on our highway, percentage-wise, per capita in West Virginia than the rest of the country. I had my staff research how many claims were filed with the Court of Claims for road damage to automobiles last year. It was over $2.7 million. And there are several of our citizens that don't even know how to do that. I don't know if it's 10 to 1 or 5 to 1, but literally I think there are millions of dollars of road damage being done to automobiles. So I would simply say, as we look at the possibility, or look at the commissioner's proposal, which I heartily looked at and said, this is a way to do this. The last person to propose a road bond was Jay Nesbitt. I was in the House
he was a Republican
the day he did it, and I was his roommate, and I said I should have gotten on that bill. And we did it in '96. It's being looked at again. It's a big bite. Of course, we're down the road several years, and you have to look at revenue sources for it, which will be the point of contention.
Yes.
And I don't think any revenue enhancements, or whatever you want to call them, should be just put on the public unless they want it to happen. And some say that it won't happen that way, but we do have a problem. We get calls about potholes, road conditions all the time. I mean, it's the thing that I get called about the most or talked about the most. So I don't know that that's really a partisan thing so much as it is, I think, a business thing. I think if you finish Route 35 as a 4-lane toll-free highway, it's 30 minutes to get to I-64 from Point Pleasant. You'll see development out there. You'll see revenue growth in our state. And there are about 15 other projects of merit mentioned in that list. So we'll see what happens. But that, to me, that's a real concrete thing. That's a jobs bill, not just for the jobs created in the construction side of it, which will go away once it's done, but for the development that usually comes. The ARC has looked at that and said, you build certain highways, you get development, you get jobs, you get infrastructure. So, in spite of all the other things we're talking about, like redistricting and things like that, this is, to me, a huge initiative that I think we ought to look at carefully and try to have some political energy behind it to get it done.
The governor did tout tax relief in his State of the State address. The food tax has been decreased. Some business franchise taxes are down. You've been very vocal, both of you, on your tax burden. Are you satisfied? And can the Republicans almost kind of take credit for these taxes going down because you've been harping on it for so many years?
I think it's, I do believe that had we not been very vocal on these, that we likely would not have had the progress we've had. Are we there where we need to be? No. We have a long ways to go, I think, in terms of some very bold initiatives. The key to economic growth, as we see, is to put more money back into the pockets of West Virginians. What they earn, they should have as much as possible to spend, and to send their kids to school, to buy homes, all those things that create a healthy economy. And so we have a long ways to go. We've always felt that some of the taxes that were gradually decreased or eliminated, we'd rather have seen that be done more quickly, because we believe that will actually spur the economic growth more quickly. So, while we're happy with the fact that we're moving in that direction, we'd like to see it a little more aggressively take place, and to be really a lot more directed at job creation and putting people back to work.
One area in the tax area, though, that it's of interest to people is that we tax Social Security income here. We tax retired. A lot of states don't do that. And it's probably a big bite to go at that. But I think, so people think about it. They reach the retirement years. More and more people look at, because of the mobility of our society, where can I go and live that I don't have to pay state taxes on my income? We have people move to the Carolinas, Florida, Tennessee, because if they stay there 6 months in a day, or at least they warrant they do, they can get. They don't pay any income tax. They pay other tax. Quite frankly, there are other taxes they will finally admit that they do pay. But you mentioned another tax, the one that affects the asset inventory.
The inventory tax.
Well, I think it's equipment tax.
Equipment and inventory.
The problem I'd love to get rid of that thing. You have to have a constitutional amendment. It's a property tax. That's part of the trouble. You just can't pass a statute and fix it. Right. You have to put it before the voters. Then it gets complex, because then revenue is lost by counties, which you do have to backfill with the tax that's not ad valorem property. And that's where the distrust comes in these counties. I represent one of them, Jackson, that was just absolutely livid about being opposed to that. But somehow we need to work through that, because manufacturing is affected. Also, there's one other area, if it's a Republican response.
Yes.
In one of the magazines that looks at legal reform, it was noted that there was not a mention of that in the governor's speech. And there are certain areas of legal reform. We have an omnibus tort reform bill we're going to introduce in the Senate. I mean, we've talked to the Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, the Chamber of Commerce, and different ones. We realize that you just can't do all this, and these are complicated questions. I'm not a lawyer, he is. But, you know, ALEC, for example, which is a group that rated the state, our state's moved up in several areas. But this is one area that we still get ranked at the bottom. And I know my trial lawyer friends say it's not true. But I look at these statistics and say, here's an area where, you know, there may be parts of our law that are too restrictive and other parts of our law that are too liberal. We have a $90 million suit against the nursing home Heartland.
Yes.
The trial bar is going to have a conference here in a week. I have seen their agenda. They have on their agenda a guy coming up from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, that filed that lawsuit to tell them how you can do it in West Virginia. Now, that's clear. So we recognize that we need, and there's going to be a bill to try to bring nursing homes under the same medical malpractice law as hospitals are under, in order to keep that from happening. So we're kind of, for Republican response, we would look at those issues more favorably than I think our counterparts on the other side.
Senator Mike Hall and Delegate Tim Armstead, an interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up, many Republicans talk about moving our state forward. There's a new campaign to get us all to do that. First, and even 100 bills were introduced in the House today. They were all rules bills that are introduced each session to allow state agencies to implement various laws pertaining to the services they provide. They are important, but routine and too numerous to list for you tonight. So here's a look at what's coming up in the House tomorrow. Up for passage in the House tomorrow, House Bill 2533 to require the identities of duly registered voters who sign a petition for a person seeking ballot access be made public. And House Bill 4072 to eliminate a general provision requiring county boards of education to meet on the first Monday of July of every year. On second reading, House Bill 4006 to exempt federal employees from the elevator workers' licensure requirements. And House Bill 4078 to extend certain deadlines of mandated actions regarding higher education personnel, classification, and compensation from dates in 2011 to dates in 2012. This bill was recommended for passage by the Legislative Oversight Commission on Education Accountability. And finally tonight, the state capitol rotunda was alive with activity today, from Zumba to mountain dance to Tai Chi. As Bob Brunner reports, the legislature is launching a program called the West Virginia Physical Activity Plan.
Give me a good shimmy.
Perhaps you are up for Zumba. Perhaps it's mountain clogging. The campaign is called Be Wild, Be Wonderful, Be Active. The goal is that citizens of the state are measurably healthier by 2015. There were celebrities to help us get started, like America's Got Talent phenomenon from Logan, Landau Eugene Murphy.
It's always good to, encourage people to do great things for their own life, for their own health. So, I'm with it. Yeah.
So are you one of those fitness fanatics? Do you do all this?
No, I play basketball a lot. I'm not in the gym all the time and stuff like that. But, as you can see, I'm slim, something worked.
Legendary pro basketball player Dominique Wilkins was an all-star for a decade. Now he's an ambassador for fitness.
The hardest thing for people to do is exercise, change their diet. Easiest thing for us to eat. That's the easiest thing. And I think a lot of times we make the mistake of thinking that there's some miracle pill out there that you can sit home and get in shape and lose weight. It don't exist. There's nothing that will make you more fit than physical activity. Personally, I was overweight when I retired. I found out I was diabetic. And I had to get back to doing some things I used to do as far as physical activity. So I ended up losing 35 pounds in 2.5 months.
Eloise Elliott is chairing the project. She says Many people have been involved in the planning, and it will succeed.
As this plan has been developed over really a couple years, and we've had stakeholders from all population sectors involved in the development of this plan. So we have those people that need to be involved really have come to the table, and now we're ready to take it out and really implement it.
It certainly doesn't hurt to have famous singers and famous basketball players tell you to get fit. The question is, will it have any long-term effect? Boone County Senator and physician Ron Stallings is leading the legislative Get Fit effort. Governor Earl Ray Tomblin spoke at the launch ceremony and notes the state has a long way to go.
According to the 2010 Public Health Preparedness Report from the CDC, 68% of West Virginians are considered to be overweight or obese, and 11% have diabetes. These are statistics that can be reversed with daily physical exercise. West Virginians are lucky. We live in the best outdoor playground in America.
West Virginia Physical Activity Day concluded with more dancing and even a fun run around the Capitol. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Bob Brunner in Charleston.
West Virginia and Texas are the only two states so far to develop state plans modeled after the national plan, which was launched in May 2010. And this has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow we'll review the new laws governing Marcellus shale gas drilling with Department of Environmental Protection Secretary Randy Huffman. Also a special report on the political life of Governor Hewlett Smith, who died on Sunday. We welcome your comments. Our email address is feedback@wvpubcast.org, or send your letters to the Legislature Today, 600 Capitol Street, Charleston, West Virginia, 25301. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.